Oh, it's a good reminder to turn off our phones now.
It's your friendly reminder.
Yes, perfect timing. Okay, we are live on the YouTube. Okay. So welcome everyone to this reading with both Jennifer Savran Kelly and Margot Douaihy. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jochum. The Bureau, for those of you who don't know, is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And this is the service. What's that?
I was wondering.
We're hoping to find that government. If you know of one that's worthy, let us know. But I think we have to do it ourselves. Yeah, but we'll get to that later. For now, we're going to enjoy some queer culture, which is the primary service that we provide, is just holding this room for queer culture. So we have regular bookstore hours, 1 to 7, Wednesdays through Sundays, and then we do lots of events that are sometimes during those hours and sometimes in the evening. If you're not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And we also have changing art exhibitions. Right now we have collages by Charlie Welch in a show called It Will End in Tears. So yeah, if you join the mailing list, you'll see what our upcoming art exhibitions are as well. Before I introduce our authors, I wanted to let you know that we do have a suggested donation of $10, but give what you can, if you can. And if you would rather buy some books to support us, that's a great way to do that. So we leave that up to you, but there's some cash in here. You can also Venmo us at BGSQD. So I'll pass this around, and we appreciate whatever you are able to give. But like I said, we do have books for sale at the back, and we'd love it if you buy those. All right, one more preliminary thing. I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We are actively seeking to partner with and provide material support to a local queer Indigenous organization. We hope to make an announcement about this partnership in the near future, but in the meantime, we encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. So first up, we have Jennifer Savran Kelly, who lives in Ithaca, New York, where she writes, finds books, and works as a production editor at Cornell University Press. End Papers is her debut novel. In 2018, it won a grant from the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund. In 2019, it was selected as a finalist for the SFWP Literary Awards Program and for the James Jones First Novel Fellowship. Her short fiction has appeared in Potomac Review, Black Warrior Review, Green Mountains Review, Iron Horse Literary Review, and elsewhere. Please welcome Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for coming, and thank you to the Bureau for hosting us. This is really, really special place to be able to do a reading. And thank you, Margot, for answering me when I just reached out to her on Twitter. We didn't know each other. And I said, hey, do you want to come do a reading with me in New York? Absolutely, yes. But your book looks really cool. Your book looks really cool. And it is. It's incredible. And art brings us together. It does. We're in the same kind of community spaces. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the invitation. Yeah. So thanks for everybody for allowing this to happen. And Margot actually picked out what I'm going to read for you from the book today. Oh, and thank you to Abby Muller. Sorry if I'm embarrassing you, but my editors. She was my editor. She was my editor through the entire editorial process, so I consider her the editor. She's my editor. Okay. So I guess all you need to know before I jump in is that this is a book about a gender queer bookbinder who works at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, conserving books, and the part I'm going to read essentially is when he is fixing a book and finds something underneath the end paper that sort of leads to most of the action of the book. So that's where I'm starting, page 16. I might stand up if that's okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. At work, it's right to business. There's been a small accident in the stacks, a tiny leak in the ceiling that's left at least one book water damaged. It's an important one, Catherine said, so she wants me in my careful hands right there with some tools for quick repair and a cart to work on in case I detect any more books that need a hand. I was more than happy to comply, to get away from her meddling stare, her complaints that I looked too boyish today. What does that mean? I asked. Depressed, she said. Bending over the cart and the book, I draw in stale, regulated air, run my fingers over the intricate design on the cover, a work of art in itself, and the indent made by each gold stamped line. It's an illustrated survey of Art Deco and Art Nouveau architecture, building beauty, found in the 1950s. I ease open the cover to reveal water-stained end papers, splitting and yellowing along the gutter. Gently turning each page, I arrive at a photograph of Gaudi's Casa Batlló, the hollow eye cavities of his skull balconies, staring up at me from beneath a wavy roof that shines iridescent in the light captured by the photographer. Below the skulls, the building is a body, both shapely and skeletal, open through the middle to reveal the life inside. Pillars carved into bones frame windows rounded into organic shapes, colorful organs of stained glass. Everywhere my gaze falls, new details emerge. When finally I lift my eyes, I feel as if I've been transported back to the library stacks from somewhere far away. It takes me a few moments to return to myself. With my hand still holding the lifting knife, I brush my bangs across my forehead. More feminine, less depressed. Then, placing my tool between my teeth, I continue my inspection of the book. The water damage appears to be limited to the outer spine. The text block is intact aside from one loose signature. A new lining on the spine will be enough to hold it in place. I open my strap and draw my lifting knife across it in figure eights as Catherine has taught me, until the round tip of the blade tapers into near invisibility. Then I open the back cover of the book and make a light incision with my scalpel along the inner edge of the board. The cover separates cleanly. In order to reattach it later, I'll need to create a new hinge and slide it underneath the original end paper. Slowly, I pass my lifting knife under the freshly cut edge to ease it away from the board as I hold the cover steady. That's when I notice a discrepancy in the feel of the board. Almost half of the end paper has already come unglued, and looking closely, I detect a faint rectangular outline just inside the loose area. With a sudden eagerness, I crouch and bring my eyes down level with the book. Attempting to keep my lifting knife steady, I run it back and forth under the paper until I catch a glimpse of something underneath. I hold my breath. A few more strokes of the knife and I'm able to jiggle it free, leaving only one tiny tear behind. What I finally hold in my hand confuses me. It's a severed paperback cover for a book called Turn Her About, with a campy illustration of a woman looking into a handheld mirror and seeing a man's face. The tagline reads, "What was her dark secret? A powerful novel about a tragic love." What is this doing here? I laugh. But then a trickle of fear descends as I remember my night out with Jay. What if someone from work saw us and is pranking me? I walk to both ends of the aisle, scanning the stacks, but there are no signs of life. The only sound, aside from my footsteps, is the hum of the HVAC system. Back at the cart, I examine the book cover again and flip it over. Handwritten on the back, in tight script with light blue ink, is a letter, written in German. Aside from a bit of blue in one corner where it had attached to the end paper, and some mild discoloration, the whole thing is undamaged. Putting the lifting knife back between my teeth, I turn the cover over in my hand several more times. Assuming it's not a cruel joke, what are the chances that this particular image would have been hidden in a book that Catherine assigned to me? The letter is addressed Liebe Marta and signed Ich liebe dich, Gertrude. Sorry, I cannot I can write it down though. Okay, what was it? I wish I could read it, but I don't speak German. These opening and closing words are the only ones I recognize. With the feeling I'm holding a ghost in my hands, I bring it up to my face and inhale the sickly sweet odor of animal glue. Despite the absurdity of the illustration and how I found it, for a brief moment, I think I'm going to cry. I know I should bring it straight to the lab, show it to Catherine, and encase it in Mylar, but as if it's a rare treasure like I used to find in the woods as a kid, a four-leaf clover, or the feather of a blue jay, I don't want to let it go. Carefully, I sandwich it between two pieces of scrap paper and slip it inside my notebook. Stop there. The narrative of the audiobook just was right. I was trying to wish I had comment into reading for me. Anyway, you should buy the audiobook because Dan isn't me.
So Margot Douaihy is a Lebanese American originally from Scranton, Pennsylvania, now living in Northampton, Massachusetts. She is the author of the poetry collections Bandit Queen, The Runaway Story of Belle Starr, Scranton Lace, and Girls Like You. She is a founding member of the Creative Writing Studies organization and an active member of Sisters in Crime and the Radius of Arab American Writers. A recipient of the Mass Cultural Council's Artist Fellowship, she was a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award, Aesthetic Magazine's Creative Writing Award, and the Ernest Hemingway Foundation's Hemingway Shorts. Her writing has been featured in Colorado Review, Diode Editions, the Florida Review, North American Review, PBS NewsHour, and elsewhere. Margot teaches creative writing at Franklin Pierce University in Rindge, New Hampshire, where she also serves as the editor of the Northern New England Review. As a co-editor of the Elements in Crime narrative series with Cambridge University Press, she strives to reshape crime writing scholarship with a focus on the contemporary, the future, inclusivity, and decoloniality. Please welcome Margot.
To all of our live stream friends as well in the rectangle, and to all of you for being here on this lovely Sunday, your pre-Oscars event. And thank you so much to Karen just for the great intro and for hosting us. And this place is really sacred. I haven't been back to the LGBT Center in many years, and I'm just so grateful for what you all do every single day, the legacy, and that we can be part of it. It's very special and very meaningful. And so this book, Scorched Grace, is my take on a hard-boiled style of mystery, and I'm really intent on queering the hard-boiled space. It's a legacy that I love within the subgenre of mysteries. I've always enjoyed that I'm a lone wolf on the meeting streets kind of sensibility, and the TCM, noir movie marathons that would be on all Christmassy that you just sort of drop into, and that have contrast of the black and white world where everyone is fallen, and it's really a study in resilience rather than the kind of abject, but of course that's there too. So just a little prelude to what I'll be reading. That our lone wolf sleuth is a very iconoclastic, unconventional sleuth whose name is Sister Holiday. She's 33 years old. She makes an unconventional, surprising move to leave her very out and proud life in Brooklyn to join a convent in New Orleans. And the mysteries are really nested. We're going to talk about that. So I just thought I'd read from a little bit from the beginning and then a section in the middle. Pain is evidence of growth. The ache means we're changing, and everyone is capable of change, even me. But that doesn't mean I always got it right. Whenever I was punished, my task was to clean the massive stained glass windows of the church. I'd climb up on a rickety ladder and shine the glass, pane by intricate pane. 11 in total, bold blue, coral, fern green, and my favorite, sanguine, the color of sacred wine, the living red of a singing tongue during Vespers. Our stained glass told stories from the Old and New Testaments, Moses akimbo, parting the Cerulean Sea. The evangelists, Matthew as a winged man, Mark as a lion, Luke as a flying ox, and John an eagle. The slow motion trauma of the stations of the cross. Adoring angels floating above the manger during the birth of Christ, our Lord, holding luminous harps like jewels in their small hands. So beautiful, it hurt to look sometimes, like watching people in church as they kneel and pray, howl and lose balance. I see people at their absolute lowest. I hear people beg God and Mary and Jesus for second chances, one planet away from their spouses or kids next to them in the pew, or so alone they've thinned to ghosts. And we're always there, us nuns, to witness, to hold space for miracles in the terror, in the boredom, in the wretched gore of life, to take it in, to watch your hands tremble, to validate your questions, honor your pain. But you never see us seeing you. Nuns are slippery like that. With my special cloth, I wiped Jesus's crown of thorns and the doves of peace. The gilded vignettes reminded me of my tattoos. Ink I was required to cover, even in the soupy heat of August. With black gloves and a black neckerchief, one of Sister Augustine's contingencies. Cleaning the windows was supposed to be my penance, and it was bone tiring, but I liked the work. Each panel bewitched me. Better drama than Facebook or a bar fight. During the first of countless castigations doled out by Sister Augustine, I discovered that if you pressed your face close to Mary's face in the nativity glass, you could peer right through her translucent eye and see New Orleans shimmering below like a moth wing. On the highest rung of the ladder, my eye to Mary's eye, I saw Faubourg Libidae unfold to the right, Chapatoulas and the hypnotic ribbon of the Mississippi. The city was electric at every hour, but at dawn I was astonished by the wattage of color that vibrated in the silken light. Pink, yellow, and persimmon painted shotgun homes stretched out in a garden district, long and narrow as train tracks. Purple and green Mardi Gras beads and gray Spanish moss dripped from the branches of gnarled oak trees. I watched the streetcar roll up and down St. Charles, passengers slowly climbing on and off as the metal trolley bell pealed through the air. Most fools imagine New Orleans as schlock and caricature, the tyranny of Bourbon Street and the green terror of Jello shots, throwing your guts up on the curb or into your crawfish etouffee. And yeah, I've rolled my eyes at that nonsense in the French Quarter. But the city is more complex and hauntingly subtle than I ever imagined, mythical and true. As true as any story can be. The intoxicating musk of sweet olive and night blooming jasmine, cobblestones the size of Bibles, the terrible symmetry of storms, the eyes and rain bands of hurricanes, sudden downpours chainsawing the air, floods and rebirth. Across the city, I stumbled into random treasures, like divine visions, St. Anne's face in the palm trees. During my first week in the order, after picking up my uniform from the guild, I walked into a dusty curiosities shop, painted in the velvet black of a Dutch still life painting that sold only bird skulls, scrimshaw, and marbles. I've never been able to find it again. Through Mary's portal, I watched peacocks roam the streets with technicolor hues of an LSD flashback, and I envied their freedom. I saw fog hover like a neon white veil over the river in the corner shop on Magazine Street, where Sister T learned that you could buy 1 bar of soap and one vial of love potion for $5. She never brought the potion home, but her eyes sparkled every time she mentioned it. So that continues with Sister Holiday's showing us the lens that she's sort of viewing the world through. And then, more of that personal experience, of that intimacy of her kind of mental exploration and reflection. And then I think we'll just end there, and I'll read another passage later. But I wanted to share that and ask you to read that because we have some overlap. There's obviously work and the kind of beautiful fetishization of work that I loved in your passage because of the feeling of, that tangible experience of the paper, obviously, and the ornamentation. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like to write about work that, feels really both magnificent and quotidian to you? Because you do this kind of work, but yet it feels very, very special.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I feel like there's two, sorry, there's something about this stool, I keep sliding forward. There are those parallels in the book, which is interesting, and also the art side, right? So both of them, so Holiday does this work, and it's a sort of meditation, right, and a learning. And then Holiday is also a musician, so she plays music, and she kind of gets lost in that and escapes in that as well. And I feel like there is something, and Dawn, my main character, does art as well, book art, and so it's not just about repairing and doing work, but also about making art. And so I think that what I see in both of our characters is that this sort of manual labor and artistic labor becomes a sort of way not only to escape from the world, but to also go deeper inside. And it's like a process of self-discovery in a way. So I really liked that. So I'm sorry, I was just thinking about the similarities. So what did you ask me?
It's so true though. Yeah, just the work, writing about work. I love reading about work. And one of the reasons I wanted to cast the lone wolf sleuth as a nun was very interesting to me on multiple levels, but the daily work of it, being very duty bound is really kind of sublime in my mind. And the work we do, obviously there's a lot of overlap, but for you, what was it like to create a character who's defined a lot of her life through her work as well?
Right. So I think that sense of sacredness, I think for Dawn, a lot of it is, it's the book itself, right? More than just the work, is the idea that one of the things that drew me to book arts as a person when I started doing bookbinding is that I feel like books, like all these different roles in our lives, they're magical. When you're a kid, they bring you to these other worlds, they have these beautiful pictures. As a person growing up, you read books and you learn about the world, you learn about yourself, you start forming your values, you're taught that things in books are true. When you love a book, you bring it into bed with you. It's a very intimate experience that you have with a book. You're turning the pages, you may be dog-earing it, you might be writing in it, you're kind of making it your own. We don't do that with a lot of art forms. And so there's something about books that has all of these things. And I wanted Dawn to have this journey of both sort of getting lost in that and experimenting with that and trying to get to know herself through that. And also ultimately feeling a sense of authority that she could be who she was and she could express it that way and people would have to believe it.
Absolutely.
So that was really for me more than just the work was just that sort of quality of the book and book arts and what that meant through that work.
Yeah, so I love that, and it comes through so beautifully in your character as well. Those layers of both discovery and so digging into so many layers of knowing, which is really fascinating. And I love the way you describe the that kind of corporeal sense of the book, just having this like physical life form, as it were.
Yeah, and that makes me think about your book. In your book, there's a lot with fire.
Yes.
And so I told you that I wanted to talk about that. So in the book, the murders that are happening they're fires, it's arson. And there's fire throughout the rest of the book as well. Do we want to talk about the layered mysteries first, or do you want to talk about fire first?
Yeah.
Does it matter?
No, I think it's, that's great. Let's start
Okay.
with fire,
Let's start with
actually.
fire.
So that, what I read to you about Sister Holly, you know, getting punished and cleaning the stained glass, and then kind of finding this really special space for her own reflection and ways of seeing through that. So then after she does that, she's out in the alleyway, wherever she has a moment to, you know, uphold the rules of the parish and her school. So she has to confiscate the contraband, so the students aren't allowed to have alcohol or cigarettes. And so she sees that, you know, she naturally has to confiscate that, and then she smokes it and drinks it. So as the cover, this glorious cover, and honoring the world of book arts and illustration and everyone that goes into the ecosystem of a book. This beautiful cover done by Will Stahl. Really gets to the heart of this experience here. So she then is out, you know, chain smoking what she's confiscated, some very fine tobacco from her wealthier student. And she's out, you know, and then she sees the school is on fire, and then a flaming body falls from the second floor, which is essentially, you know, one of the, I have a cluster of inciting incidents, which this is one of the major ones. And so there's the fire there, you know, the fire of her cigarettes, and of course, there are these kind of touch points throughout the book that unite all the ways that we think about fire, move through fire, passion, burning, both life-giving forces as well as completely destructive and ravaging forces. So in this, I'll just read a little passage which centralizes the fire. And of course, setting this in New Orleans was very important for that and for this character's quest. This perhaps, is it a doomed quest? Is it not? But to get a sense of restarting her life. So besides being you know, she's taken this provisional vow with the Sisters of the Sublime Blood in New Orleans, and she teaches music as well in the school that's attached to this Catholic church, which is St. Sebastian's. Another nod to our queer culture. I don't know if you know the work of Derek Jarman, and St. Sebastian is very much a queer icon. And I just to say, this art that we're reading in front of is just glorious. So one of the other ways that she serves the community and serves the God she believes in is through this volunteer work she has at the Prison Birth Center. So, and it's also a way for me to write a kind of anti-capitalist and radically kind of anti-incarceration exploration. So it might sound paradoxical to write that through a convent and through a nun, but we'll get there. So she's on her way to the Prison Birth Center. That Tuesday was another test. I trudged to the prison with my guitar during the hottest part of the afternoon, drowning in sweat as I trailed behind a second line. Women with trumpets and white dresses played and sang as they marched. No need for a special holiday. Every day brought a parade. Waking up was a reason to celebrate debaucherously. Even the puppets seemed drunk in New Orleans. Raunchy and burlesque, my mind swirled with the gruesome and miraculous discoveries I had made in my 1 year as a sister, as I cleaned or ministered. A bag of money glowing inside a false wall of the church. A mummified cat in the convent crawl space. I buried it in the garden. People of all ages danced in the second line, carrying a large portrait of an elder honoring a life of their father, cousin, neighbor, friend, boss, fellow human being. All the sinners and healers together, drunk on warm beer, donning ivory funeral attire, praying for redemption, crying for rebirth. Like me, at least I had a plan. Actually, it was God with a plan, but I was one hell of a wing woman, a holy instrument. Me, God's mercenary, in a scalding town where the air was as thick as the vice grip of a whiskey hangover. Not that I've been hung over recently, but some fevers the body doesn't want to forget, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you sweat. When Saint Augustine stared into the inferno, he cried not for water, but flames. Give me the fire. So looking at the ways that you can test yourself, you know, that crucible of testing yourself at really high heats and testing your mettle is a thematic kind of connective tissue of the book. And this character is an extreme character. It's highly stylized. She makes some impulsive decisions. for reasons that as you read, you learn about, some misguided, some really honoring a genuine devout sense of seeking and ways of knowing. And some of that was really challenging for me to write. I grew up in the Catholic faith, in the Maronite Catholic faith, and I eventually, moved away from that. As growing up queer, was closeted, wasn't exactly accepted at all. My family is quite religious, and I wanted to hold that dialectic tension where you could explore something and explore the ways that it brings people comfort when they need it the most, as well as acknowledge the incredible damage that it does to vulnerable communities, in an intersectional lens. So that all kind of happens in this book. And as with your book as well, the idea of holding text in your hands and having this intimate relationship with it, using it almost as both a mirror and a kind of refraction. Similarly, I have her quoting scripture, I have to do a lot of research and kind of remind myself, but it is also there. So in some ways it was very reparative for me to actually write a character like Sister Holiday, who is genuinely devout, as well as unapologetically gay, a total rabble rouser, has a gold tooth from a bar fight, tattooed stem to stern. It doesn't take anyone's, stuff. I don't know what we can say on live stream. But, again, it's this like hard-boiled tradition that I'm really interested in both inhabiting and subverting. So there are these wisecracks and brio and swagger that really act as a kind of an armor against her inner terror and her inner vulnerability. So, but the fire is, constantly there. It's constantly ghosting her. It's constantly magnetizing her in the ways that we're sometimes drawn to the things that destroy us. Short, long answer to your question about fire. It's there. And I also like ecosystems. Like, I don't know if you have any Alan Smith fans, like the quartet of summer, fall, right? You know what I'm saying? So like Scorched Grace is the first book in a trilogy. Second book is Blessed Water, and third book is Howling Ghost. So they each have, fire, Blessed Water is like floods and sublimation and drowning and swallowing. And I like that. I'm a poet in my heart, and I like having those anchor points of theme and feeling and kind of almost a climate that I can exist in and have the characters both work with and work against. Do you as well? Like when you were, I know it's different in your book, but in terms of those themes, did that emerge for you when you were writing, or is that something you had intentionally in your mind as you were writing it first?
An interesting question. I mean, for me, it was, I think the book was more of like a friend, I like the idea of Dawn's work and in terms of, or are you talking about more about faith or about?
Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps that idea for your character, who's then also, of course, discovering like this mystery to be solved,
right?
Which is, probably a great segue into that if you want to talk about that.
Right. Yeah, it was, I mean, I feel like for Dawn, a lot of the work was very internal and very much through art and through collaboration. But there is a scene, I mean, there's also that temple scene where she grew up Jewish and she sort of let it go for a lot of the same reasons of feeling like this push and pull toward religion. And if I'm queer and my parents aren't accepting me, then why should I, none of that's actually in the book stated outright, but you get the sense that she has gone away from religion. And then there's a scene in the book where there's a violent hate crime, and she walks away from that and is inspired to go to a temple. It's Shabbat, it's Friday night, and the rabbi happens to be giving a sermon that oh no, actually the rabbi's not giving a sermon. She's flipping through the prayer book, the Siddur, and comes across a meditation, a Shabbat meditation that feels like it's very much related to what she's going through at the time, and stops and talks to the rabbi about it. And the rabbi actually knows about a sermon that was given and tells her about this sermon. And so she's definitely not a believer and she's not finding religion, but she's constantly looking for something larger than herself so that she can see herself in it. She has no reference point for herself. It's 2003, before people were using they them pronouns in the mainstream, saying they were non-binary or genderqueer. So Dawn really doesn't have the language or anything to sort of measure herself against, and isn't really even understanding what's going on with her. And so is always looking for something bigger than herself. And ultimately this letter that she finds, because it's on the back of this, you know, cover of a pulp novel of somebody who's looking to maybe be trans or at least, you know, gender unclear, she becomes quite obsessed with, you know, who is this person that wrote this letter in the 1950s? She finds out it's a love letter and thinks, I need to know what happened. I need to know, like, did things work out for this person? If they did, maybe that means they'll work out for me. And I think we all have that desire, and especially in communities where, like queer communities, if your own family's not accepting you, to have that desire to see, like, well, who are my ancestors? Where do I come from? Who am I? And so that question is really at the heart for Dawn of the mystery and of, you know, looking everywhere for answers. It's like she's really looking for herself, and just to get solid in who she is and be able to express it to the world. And so she doesn't quite get there at the end of the book, but she's on her way, which I really love. And
feels very true, emotionally true to me.
yeah. And so the mystery, you asked about the mystery, and for me, that's really how it functions, is like, I felt like in some ways it needed to be a mystery because Dawn is on this path of discovery. And I thought this was like a great external object to give Dawn to be on this path of discovery. And even so, it goes out, it goes in, and it has that sort of tension throughout the book of looking out and looking in, and looking out and looking in, and having to, you know, think about, when I'm looking out, you know, how am I going to, you know, nothing from on the outside is going to show me exactly who I am. So how do I take all of that and then figure out what that means for myself, and how do I express that, you know?
And I love that, and it's such a great, engaging kind of method to gives readers so much purchase into Dawn's journey, because, you know, she doesn't quite, it's not a tidy experience like life is, you know, and that again feels like just so emotionally rich, as well as just a great kind of wonderfully propulsive moment.
Thank you. Yeah, it was funny. I found Margot's book because Papers ended up on like the most anticipated crime reads list somehow. And I didn't understand, and I thought, oh right, because it's a mystery. And then Margot's book was on the same list. I thought, wow, people are going to be very surprised if they come to my book only this way, looking for a crime read.
That's, I think what's so wonderful is the mystery genre is so elastic.
Yeah.
There's room for, there's so many subgenres, the cozy, the procedural, you know, mystery, just almost like a puzzler, an existential mystery, you know, the locked room mysteries. And that's what I love about working in this form, you know, in terms of writing. And as you're saying, it's both this exterior and interior journey, that the mirror is this, the mystery is a mirror, really. But I've always felt like, you know, it's nice that genre is really having its moment. It has for a while, but that the appetite is there to take mysteries for the art, really rich art form that they are. I mean, did you read mysteries growing up, or when did you first find yourself intrigued by them?
I've read a couple of mysteries. It's through like movies.
Yeah, of course.
So when I sit down and watch a movie these days, I really want a movie that is just going to make me like want to know what is happening next all the time. I think just because I'm old and tired, and it's when I'm watching a movie anymore. And there's just something, I'm what they call the perfect audience. I'm not sitting there trying to figure it out as I watch. Like, I'm happy to go along for the ride. And so I guess on the most superficial level, there was a part of me that was like, well, if I write a mystery, even if people don't like it, they're not going to be able to stop reading.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not why I did it, but that definitely was like, I might be onto something here. But also, so that leads me to, in your book, you also have, so it's a mystery in the sense that there are these murders, there are these fires, and Holiday becomes the sort of amateur super sleuth. But so there's Holiday's mystery, but then there's also a mystery, a second mystery for the reader of how did this person become a nun, you know? And the story goes back and forth between, without spoiling anything, the story goes back and forth between Holiday's sort of backstory and the mystery that she's trying to solve. And so the reader kind of gets these two mysteries along the way. And I was really interested in how they ended up informing each other, and how you played with the genre in that way, although you had also very thoughtfully said when we zoomed that that's the thing about mysteries, right? It's like when you start to unravel the mystery, you start to pull a thread, there's going to be another thread, right? So it's like mysteries aren't usually very straightforward. So I really liked that about your book and thought it's wanted to know if you had anything to say about that experience of writing these two mysteries and having them be sort of talking to each other throughout the whole book.
I always feel like there's this plurality of mysteries, like there's this nesting of mysteries. So you have the who done it and then the why done it and then what the hell, so there's this like broader arc of just question, and I really love that about mysteries in general, and writing them is this, kind of clue engineering. You have to put on this way of thinking through causality and plot points and scene so that you create this through line about the digressions are on purpose. And you can redirect and misdirect, and the characters' partialities and occlusions are part of the reader's experience of trying to figure out what is happening, who is behind the arson spree and why. So I've always felt like mysteries are this epistemological form, ways of knowing. How do we know what we know? So you could really center that in a mystery, kind of foregrounded. So you have, of course, in the classic, Agatha Christie, like the body in the library, and then of course, through the variety of genres, I wanted to play with that as well. I mean, of course, the body falling from, kind of flaming angel actually falling to the ground that Sister Holiday rushes to go check on. But then throughout that, we have the narrative present and the narrative past in this kind of duet. And I personally don't believe in backstory. I just believe in story. So I think it all has to have the same tone and it all has to kind of move at the same pace. Otherwise, it can be very decelerating. And you want to linger at the moments that are particularly important to hold. Sometimes you can be reading, scanning. What is a vital clue? What is a red herring? I read that way a little bit, but I'm also a poet and I love poetry. So I like when words kind of make me stop, like force me to stop. So there is that, I want to be seized. I want to be put in a chokehold by the work, by the writing. And then there are other times where you just literally cannot stop flipping through. And I've had the incredible, insane good luck to be published by Gillian Flynn, the author of Gone Girl, which I felt was like a total page turner, in so many ways. So I wanted to bring that gift of what I think is an incredible dopamine rush of like a page turner, but with poetry. So my take on that, for bringing that into the mystery, is those questions of the past, that we can't let go of. And you can like close your eyes and see yourself as the person you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or then, in the future, in the ways that, all of that can kind of coexist. And trying to write that in a way which is very pristine and not, letting the plot get a little too like saggy or baggy or anything like that, so that it keeps it nice and tight. Something I was just very mindful of as I wrote. But when I read or watch any kind of mysteries, from Happy Valley to whatever crime show, murder show I'm watching, it's about the investigative figure. So it's either the detective or the sleuth themselves, but you want to follow them into the burning building. You want to follow them wherever they're going. So I wanted to create a character that felt, very real to me, very nuanced and surprising, who just can't relax into herself. And of course, there's a great, rich experience, media, exploration of queer nuns, nunsploitation of the 1970s. And I also wanted to both work with that and then push against that as well. So there's a lot going on in this mystery, but ultimately I wanted it to be something that true mystery fans would devour. So that's just, I really love that. I love the mystery world. So it was taking a big swing with this one. Oh yeah. So we'll maybe just converse a little bit more and then take questions and sign some books if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm also curious. I know you just answered a question, but I have another one.
Well, they do nest. The questions are nesting.
I mean, because we were gonna start with this, and I feel like this is something that people often are interested in or ask about, and I'm really interested. So what was the actual original idea for your book and your process in getting started?
So again, I love the genre, and I just was always captivated by those, the trench coat wearing sleuth that was like whiskey drinking and like usually alone, also a little bit of a loner, not an authority figure. So it's the PI is not a cop, but not a civilian. They're sort of in between. So an insider outsider has always been kind of knocking around in my brain, rattling around. And then 10 years ago, I was in a hot yoga class in Scranton, Pennsylvania, laying, on the ground, like a wet rag, like drenched, they could just wringing out. And the instructor was like, giving us like words of wisdom, because I think we were all like falling apart and dead. And she, who knows what she said to me, probably like, Margot, like, breathe, And she's like, Brent, wonderful form, Bree, you're looking great. Sister Nancy, terrific effort. I was like, there's a nun in our class. There's a nun in our hot yoga class. And of course it was like everyone was just like basically naked, hot. It's like you don't just wear shorts and like a sports bra or whatever. So I was scanning around the room and I was like, is it you? Is it you? Who's the nun? Who's you? So in the end I thought like, I make such snap judgments about people, even me, like this intersectional like being or whatever. And I thought, wow, what did I think she would look like? What age did I think of? Because when I was in Catholic school, all the nuns that I had as teachers were like 85 and above. So I thought, oh my God, my sleuth is a nun. She's a nun. She's a tatted up gay nun with chainsaws. So all there.
I love that the
Because like there's always this smoke, the like noir smoking guy, and like I'm gonna throw it all, like shred it all, but like honor it all in one book. Then turn into a trilogy. But that's honestly, and you're the first audience to know this.
I can't believe that you don't tell that story.
And I never figured out who it was. There were like 15 people in the class. And I was like studying all of the bases, trying to just like pull out the, devotional liturgical knowledge. It was a mystery. That's how it started.
Interesting. Very, I like it.
What about you? Were you finding book and did you discover something in favor?
No, I was not. What is funny though is my friend Patty who's here. We were really into like paper art and things like that. We used to do all kinds of crafts and stuff. And so when she was graduating from undergrad, this is a very long time now, I went to Kate's Papery, which is this, I don't know if it's still here, that like giant size stationery store. And they had this little bookbinding kit. And I was like, oh, this is a graduation gift for Patty. And I brought it up to the counter and they said, oh, do you know about the Center for Book Arts? And I thought I was gonna die on the spot. I was like, there is a center for book arts? No, tell me more. And so they gave me a catalog, and in my very first bookbinding workshop there, the instructor was talking to us about the anatomy of a book, and we were all sitting around. I was like, I'm not the only pervert who cares about and everyone was like, oh, and she said, there was a time when it wasn't entirely uncommon for people to hide personal letters like under the end papers of books, and so sometimes binders would find them. And I thought it was at the same time the most tragic and romantic thing I'd ever heard in my life. Because tragic because wow, you have something to say to someone and you need to hide it, and romantic because oh my God, you have something to say to someone and you hide it. And also I couldn't stop thinking about like the person who ended up with the book with the letter in it, not knowing. Like I thought, does it have some impact on you even if you don't know it's there? Like if you're carrying this thing around, is it like somehow through osmosis? Like are you getting something from it? It just was so fascinating to me. And like, decade or more went by, I never thought about writing about it at all. And then somebody said to me that I should write a novel about bookbinding, and I was like, no. And then like a couple of years after that, I was sitting around and I thought, what about that thing about somebody hiding a letter, and maybe I could get a story out of that. And I had always wanted to write a queer story. I just never never could. So I thought maybe this is the one. And
It
so
is.
those two ideas came together.
It's been tremendous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was it. It was really just this sort of like this idea that nagged at me for like over a decade.
And I think that's our curiosity is then imparted like into this every single page. And I think that's really important because, you know, there's just this vital pulse for me that is kind of questioning who are these people, who are these characters, and in particular, this, you know, woman who makes this choice to live one life and join another is just so interesting to me personally. And I folks who are, you know, who live with duty and purpose are really important to me. Nurses, you know, people who work in daycare, teachers, like heroes, you know, nuns too. And they were, you know, the nuns that were my teachers they were pretty rough, but they also, they didn't have money, they didn't have cars, they baked their own bread. You know, I amp it up, you know, in this book with a whole lot of imagination, but I was fascinated by that. It's like them living in a commune. They went where they wanted to go. They read and prayed and did their worship all day. It's a remarkable kind of way of living in so many ways. And so I thought it'd be interesting kind of antidote to sort of today's narcissism of like, you know, social media and all the things. Like, and I also wanted to write a sleuth with no cell phone. So that's the way to do it. You write it down. It's like every time you pick up, you know, oh, what's their, where were they? Let me check their alibis. Like I wanted to actually make it much harder for this investigative mind to figure things out and synthesize constantly. So that's, you know, another element of the mystery is, you know, what is her kind of actual experience like? And so it's part of it.
Yeah, and I feel like we should take questions, but I just wanted to say about your book, one of the things that really struck me is that it's also, you know, there are women at the heart of this book, and they've all been, or many of them have been through some pretty extreme life stuff, shall we say, and have made these really extreme choices as a result. And it's just a really fascinating read from that level too, of just looking at this group of women and how what they've been through and what they go through is informing their relationships with one another. So I was really taken in by that when I was reading. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that's really important. I wanted to narrativize that, like, you know, ways of thinking about sisterhood, like her with her kind of riot girl punk band in Brooklyn, as well as this convent of 4 nuns. You know, she's the youngest by 40 years, but still there's that. And then also she, you know, one of the, in her past, you know, starts sleuthing because she wants to avenge a horrific crime against her gay brother. So I was really interested in kind of making a narrative frame around queer people taking care of each other, a lesbian taking care of her gay brother. It just, this is really important to me personally to kind of really showcase nuance within the queer community. And there's more of that, you know, a lot more of that in the book with her students, and she's trying to take care of them as well. And it's a way of her taking care of herself.
You should all read it.
And you should all read it, papers. They're really different, but they're such great compliments.
Yeah, they really are. It was a good, but I got to read it.
Thanks for DMing me on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, so wondering if anyone has any questions for either one of us or both of us. Good answer.
Yeah, I don't have it fully worked out, but I noticed that with the story, there were a lot of, in looking at the characters, there were a lot of instances with hair. And, you know, it seemed like the hair, there's different hairstyles that people have. Some have their head shaved. And even in the passage you read about the bangs falling in front of the eyes and being pushed back, did it have a meaning to you? It almost seemed to me like it may have been kind of a fluid kind of identifier for a person, but I was wondering, you know, what it meant to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you noticed that, because there is a lot about hair. And I think one of the first times that I was introduced to the idea of somebody being genderqueer, and I didn't have a word for it at all, was just somebody that I met and dated a little bit who had who identified at that time as a female lesbian and had this hair that was just, you know, hanging in her face like that. And so she could either have it hanging in her face, down in her face, or she would tuck it under a baseball cap. And she didn't do anything in particular to make herself look one way or another, but something about the hair, I don't know, but she like, we'd be hanging out in a diner and like, we were in college and like these obviously straight girls would be walking by and like kind of looking at her all flirty, thinking she was just like a really pretty hot guy. And it was so disarming to me that just by, flipping her hair around somehow. But also like the attraction I always had to guys with longer hair, was it more feminine, and wanting my hair to be shorter because that maybe meant that I could look more masculine if I wanted to, or more androgynous. And it is funny how we put so much on hair as a culture, and it's less so now, but I even think about like, how my grandparents would be like, oh, that person is such a pretty girl, why does she keep her hair so short? Like it's a shame. And there's a thing about gender, it was very gendered for a very long time, and I feel like it's a lot less so in the last couple of years. And people like Scarlett Johansson shaving the side of her head or something, like it's just more in the mainstream. But for a long time, I feel like that was sort of a clue to somebody's like sexuality or gender identity. And back in 2003, maybe I was thinking it still kind of might have been a little bit that the case, that you could more clearly tell by looking at somebody in their hairstyle, like did they shave part of it, did they, just there, yeah, it signaled something. So yeah.
I have a question about the end papers. So I haven't read it.
That's okay.
There's
I'm gonna quiz you.
There's that comic where she discovers a paperback cover of a pulp novel.
Yeah.
Did pulp literature at all influence or inform
Yeah, very much so. Not necessarily the writing style, but there's a backstory. I don't want to like spoil too much, but so basically what I was interested in was that, do you know about the lavender scare? Okay, so I was looking into the lavender scare, and one of the interesting things that I realized was like right around the time that was starting, gay pulp fiction was sort of invented. And even though it's horrific and the endings are terrible and people are on drugs and they're killing themselves and it's like, whatever you do, don't be gay. At the same time, people were finally seeing themselves on the page, and also people who weren't old enough to go to gay bars were finding each other through the fact that they were all reading these books. And so on the one hand, you have the lavender scare going on, and on the other side, you have all this pulp fiction coming out that's supposed to be scaring people away from being gay, but really the publisher just wanted to make money, and they knew that the only way that they could sell them was if they made gay life seem terrible. So like they didn't really have an agenda except selling books, and gay people just wanted to read gay books and meet each other. So it ended up allowing gay people, queer people to organize around the time that the lavender scare was going on. So I was really interested in that tension. And so I wanted pulp fiction to play a role in the book, because I always thought of it as just this terrible thing, and I didn't really understand that history. And when I looked deeper into it, I thought, oh, there's something a lot more there that I wasn't seeing and I want to play with. So yeah, I did write one fake excerpt of a pulp novel in the book, and that was the most fun I had. Oh, look, and I remember because I sent it to Abby back there, and I said, I'm sorry, it's a little melodramatic, but I was just having fun. And she wrote back, she's like, can you make it more melodramatic? Absolutely.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook of School Trace really recently, and I want to see if you had any interaction with Mara about how she performed each part, because it was really distinctive, and I really loved it.
Did you like it?
Loved it. That's great.
Alex.
It is Alex. Hi.
Another artist and media maker of Queer Nuns, everyone. So, yes, the audiobook of Scorched Grace is incredibly narrated by Mara Wilson, who is an actor writer. She starred as Matilda in the 90s version, and 92nd or 42nd Street, and a bunch of other films and things like that. Is it there? She's incredible. She actually fought really hard to get the gig, which I was like, I fainted pretty much. I was a poet, like in obscurity for like a decade or more, and then it's like going fun, and I was just like, what is happening? And I'm just gonna roll with it. It's a incredible experience to work with an artist like her. Basically, the idea was like tone and how noir to go. And there's that is like the type of work that I'm really interested in is this the hard boiled, which has a pulp, origin. Again, the lone wolf, but that it's this hard experience, hard boiled, hard drinking, hard living, in order to kind of create those layers. So that I think she just absolutely exquisitely unpacked, with that incredible kind of economy, but she has the swagger, the wise ass, the wisecracks, but you can just feel the trembling of ache. And that's what I think she just did really brilliantly. And I said that, I'm like, it's actually really, for as dark as this book is, humor is so important. It's so important to me. And, that sort of triangle of aesthetics of like sexy, sad, funny is where I live, where that sort of Venn diagram overlaps, maybe some weird as well, but like, achingly beautiful, like, heartbreaking, and just really kind of darkly funny. And Mara's just a genius. And it's like a 9.5-hour book. And she just like lived with these characters for all of that. It's, and I know we have a narrator here as well.
Yes, also, I was totally amazed. I just let Danny, I said, Danny, do what you want, make it yours. They did.
I can't wait to listen. Thanks for the question. Any other questions?
Margot,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, how long did you spend in New Orleans? And did you write while you were down there? Did you write from memory?
I lived there for 2 years, between 2008 and 2010. And there I knew I wanted to create something there that could keep me studying it, keep me learning about it, keep me mentally there and in my heart, because it's such a special place. In my opinion, no shade on New York, but like I feel like New Orleans is such an important city in this country, in this world. And I wanted to do that, really explore the understory of it more so than what our tropes might suggest, and also play with that as a character. So immediately setting the lens of an outsider, because that's not, space. She's coming to it new. I didn't want to, pretend in any way, shape, or form that she was of the area. So kind of honoring that she's new to this place as well. So I did, just 2 years wasn't long enough, but I'll be back in maybe 2 weeks for the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival and the Saints and Sinners Queer Literary Festival. I mean, it's such a great queer, historical legacy as well as all the others. Have you lived there too?
I'm from there. 2000, yeah, 23 years. I get back twice a year.
See, I would like something like that.
Families down there, Cajun country, Southwest Louisiana, but grew up.
Yeah, I just was, felt it was both bewitching and important and real. So I wanted to play with that myth as well. And I know Michael, he lives there as well for a while. And yeah, just sort of like a love letter to New Orleans and mysteries and queerness.
My question too. Margaret, one thing that I love about your wonderful book is I thought there was an interesting parallel between the Catholic Church and queer life and the community that they offer, but then also the experience of the individual within that community can be complicated. And this may apply to your book as well. I haven't read it, but I don't know if there's some tension about being in a community and not being in a
Oh,
community.
well, there is, but not with the church.
Yeah, not in the church, just in terms of, I was more asking about is, the tension of, her being sort of an ex-lesbian, but sort of not an ex-lesbian, and, I just thought that was really interesting to explore those complicated feelings of both feeling connected and also not being disconnected.
Yeah, and I dove right ahead first into that. And other characters are like, oh, so you're not gay anymore? She's like, of course I'm gay. And I really wanted to build both this, real figurative feel around the psyche around that question, so that she describes it as, that she's, she's now in a relationship with the universe, but she's still very gay, so I'm constantly playing with those tensions about where we can be our full and whole selves. Because, you know, again, I'm no longer, you know, practicing Catholic. And I deeply respect what it's done for my family who are religious. And I also honor and acknowledge the unbelievable and measurable damage that it has done for the past 2,000 years and continues to do against, you know, vulnerable communities. So I wanted to bake it all, you know, into the character study and what that means for her. When is she colluding with it by joining, you know, a convent? But the work she's doing is kind of an antidote to that, to the harms. So I thought that was really interesting. And, you know, personally, just feel like institutions are in this moment of reimagining what is school? Like, we can Zoom school. Like, what is worship? What is anything? Who am I? You know, your question of your character Dawn asking, like, who am I? So those institutional identities, her queerness, the way she defines being a lesbian, whilst, you know, married to the universe. It's just really interesting because I also feel like there are so many ways to be everything. So that's guiding me. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
thank
wrap.
you.
Thank you both so much. So as both Jennifer and Margot mentioned, they are happy to sign books, and there they are. So please have a look around and hang out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah.